Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
Now, let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week?
So, adding on to the onslaught of controversial legislation pushed by Florida's Republicans, the Parental Rights in Education bill was passed by the Florida Senate Education Committee. The bill, dubbed as the Don't Say Gay bill from opponents, would prohibit schools from encouraging, quote, classroom discussions about sexual orientation or gender identity in primary grade levels or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students, end quote. Furthermore, it would allow parents to sue schools if they did not provide information regarding a student's, quote, mental, emotional, or physical health or well being, end quote. This includes, as confirmed by Florida Republican State Senator Dennis Baxley, information about a child's sexuality or gender identity, essentially forcing school officials to out their students to their parents. Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis voiced his support of the bill, stating that LGBTQ plus curriculum, quote, is entirely inappropriate. Schools need to be teaching kids to read, to write. They need to teach them science, history. We need more civics, end quote. However, many LGBTQ plus advocacy groups and even President Biden himself have condemned the bill as hateful and harmful to youth. So, Andre, I want to ask you, is the Parental Rights in Education bill problematic or protective of parents' rights over their child's education?
It is incredibly problematic and incredibly disrespectful. Whether you agree with it or not, LGBTQIA people exist. LGBTQI people have always been here and will always be here. And Governor DeSantis, I want to address you specifically. Stop using a smokescreen fallacy to excuse your racism, homophobia, and bigotry. You don't really care about education in schools because if you did, you'd know that adding education doesn't take away from learning. This is the second time that you're involved in trying to create legislation and policy to specifically attack a marginalized community because it conflicts with your white Christian ideals. You are part of the problem. And people like you are the reason that Daquon and I will never stop fighting for the marginalized, because if we ever do, people like you will continue to tear us down and stifle our voices. This policy isn't in an effort to protect the mental health of children. This policy is to protect heteronormativity. This policy is to ensure that conservative parents can find out whether or not their child is gay without their permission. If you truly cared about the mental well-being of children, you know that outing a student to their parents could get them violently abused, kicked out of their home, or worse, killed. School is supposed to be a safe space for all students, not just straight white students. And this policy is creating an incredibly hostile environment for LGBTQIA people. And I just want to pass this question back on to you, Daquon. Do you think this bill is problematic?
Is the sky blue? Because obviously, if you can read and write and see or listen or hear just about anything, you would know that this bill is absolutely problematic.
Yeah.
Because, oh, Ronnie boy, I'm going to call him Ron. Ron, I'm talking to you. Ron, we have a problem. Because obviously you do not actually care about the students in Florida. You do not actually care about the parental rights of parents for their children's education. Because if you cared about students, you would know that it is so important for students to be able to see representations of themselves. It's so important for students to be able to have, effective discussions in a place like a classroom where they are moderated and There are
Mm-hmm.
teachers in place who have an education, have training, and have the capacity to facilitate useful discussions.
Mm-hmm.
You would also know that there are queer people who wrote some of America's best literature there out there, the best literature in the world, actually. You
Mm-hmm.
would also know that there is queer scientists who have been on the precipice of so many innovations across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
You would also know that queer people are in our history.
Mm-hmm.
Queer history is a part of American history. And you would also know that when it comes to civic duties, queer people exercise it the most when it comes to making sure and protesting for their rights.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time, we didn't have it. And so just that claim that you make is absolutely unfounded. Queer and LGBTQ plus curriculum can provide a safe space for so many queer youth in our country, especially when we consider that in the past 2 years, a majority of queer youth have seriously considered suicide, especially when we consider that out of youth surveyed by the Trevor Project, only 1 in 3 children find that their house is LGBTQ affirming.
Mm-hmm.
And if you also cared about the parental rights, all of parents' rights to their child education, you would not let a bill like this pass.
Mm-hmm.
Because a bill like this says, for the homophobic and bigoted parents, we care about your rights. For other parents, we don't care about what you want your child to learn. Because imagine a child not being able to learn, about themselves or anything like that. And, of course, people will always say, well, you can teach them all that LGBTQ stuff at home. But if that child learned something at home and they went to their teacher the next day and was like, teacher, guess what I learned over the weekend? And they told them, and the teacher was like, that is inappropriate for school. We're not going to talk about that. Think about how devastated that child is. And if they feel a special connection to that type of material, they're going to be even more devastated about who they are as an individual. They're going to start believing that they are inappropriate for school. School is not for them. In fact, a lot of things are not for them because these thoughts are inappropriate. They are immoral.
Yeah, I think there is so much misinformation about gay love and romance in conservative circles specifically. You see, these conservative people, usually, let's be real, religious types, Christians, love to use the sexual angle when discussing gay representation discussions around sexuality and gender identity. I mean, even in this bill, it's looking at it through a sexual lens when it states that they don't want to prohibit the class, they want to prohibit the classroom discussion in primary grade levels or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. I mean, what exactly do they think they'll be telling these children when it relates to gay people? Gay love is not synonymous with sex. Just as straight love can be innocent and age appropriate, so can gay love. I mean, I don't know about you, Daquon, but I could name dozens and dozens of kids shows that show mommies and daddies in relationships, several kids and teen shows that talk about what it's like to have a crush, what it's like to ask someone to a dance or on a date, first kisses, and so on several different age ranges with storylines that are appropriate to the age that they are talking to. What the fuck makes you think that we can't do the same thing with a gay or lesbian relationship? And if it is so problematic and so inappropriate to see gay people or to see any kind of sexual orientation, then let's erase all of it. No parents, no romantic relationships or love story arcs whatsoever. Every single iteration, even remotely suggesting a relationship between two characters needs to be kept away from children. And if you think that's a stupid idea or that it doesn't make any sense, then stop saying that you're protecting your children. Stop saying that you don't want them to see gay relationships because they are inappropriate, and stop saying that you don't want schools encouraging those kinds of conversations. Be honest. You aren't protecting your kids. You're shielding them from a real part of society that you don't agree with. Gay relationships aren't inappropriate. You're just regurgitating a mistranslated scripture from a book where most of you conveniently ignore the part where it said that your God will use the same judgment you put on others to judge you. But we ain't gonna talk about that because that's another episode. And you aren't really afraid that talks about sexual orientation and gender identity will encourage your child to be a part of the LGBTQIA community. You're afraid that if schools do discuss it, your child will realize who they are, and that is what scares you. That's what terrifies you. But let me tell you a secret. You see, my family never allowed me to be around or even see LGBTQIA people. Gay love was always talked about as something that was immoral, disgusting, and of course, of the devil. And my school never, ever had an open space where it was discussed in a normal, healthy way. And guess what? A bitch is still gay as fuck.
And you know what? I'll take it to the next level. They're not just scared about their child figuring out who they are. They're scared that the child will figure out how wrong the parent is. And that's going to check their ego. That is going to hurt them so hard in their ego and pride, because the child is going to realize that all of the homophobic rhetoric that the parent is spitting is wrong. It's foundless. And they are going to be like, you don't know everything that you think you do. You are not this authority figure that has it out for the best of me like you think you are. And that hurts a parent. That hurts them straight in their ego. And I also want to say that when a bill like this is passed, a lot of times they keep things so vague that nobody can actually do anything with it. Because what does developmentally appropriate means? What is age appropriate in this context? It's not explicitly defined. And so even with a bill like this, where they specifically say primary school, when you don't specifically define what age appropriate is, then you can add that to middle schools, you can add that to high schools, and then you are creating an even bigger problem. As well as, I understand that there are some exceptions in it that the bill does provide for teachers to hide certain information from a parent if they feel that it's, especially harmful for the child. However, again, they provide no clear, defined terms and conditions in the legislation itself. And so if a teacher says, hey, I didn't want to tell the parents because I feel like there's something going on there that could hurt the child, the parent can easily be like, I don't know why the teacher would think that of me. There's nothing in writing between us that would give them that impression. They're just making an assumption about me. And that's actually more hurtful to me. And that gives the homophobic, bigoted parent more fuel for their fire.
And I also think that in that same vein, Daquon, who's to say that the people or the teachers think that gay conversion therapy is a bad thing? Who's to say that they think that the parent beating their child to be straight, thinking that that'll work, is a bad thing? Because if they don't think it's a bad thing, they wouldn't see that as a threat. So of course they would tell the parent anyway. So it's in that same corner. It's like, if this is all just based off of the teacher's prerogative, then what if their prerogative is homophobia too?